one of the things I've learned about going through a whole cycle of selling an agency is don't be that guy who has to be busy. Be that guy who takes care of himself. I call it like the better project. I'm always trying to get better,
Mm-hmm.
either physically, or talent wise, or production wise, or so I'm always trying to do better things. So I've thought, you know, to keep my calendar open to get those things done. I'm sort of filling my calendar with what I want to do as opposed to the
Mm-hmm.
calendar filling me up. So
Yeah.
I would say I'm pretty limited on like what I approach for like
Yeah.
keeping myself into these busy calendars. You want to sell a business, ideally you should not be able to be part of the business. Meaning, if someone wants to buy your business, if you have to be part of the sale to make it happen, then it's really difficult because that's what ends up being a challenge. I think that's the lesson. I'd say think about churn as the most important thing. New business is good, but keeping business is more important. I think when you build a business, you'll take anybody who can fog a mirror because you're just trying to build revenue. And
Right.
and sure, that works because you need it. But after a while, you start to go, okay, maybe it's not the best idea to bring, the guy who's throwing rocks as
Yeah.
opposed to the client who's asking you for help.
Hey, welcome to the Unfucked Agency. I'm Brad. This is the show where agency owners quit pretending that everything's fine and actually talk about what's broken and what they did to fix it. Every agency owner listening to this show has fantasized about getting the check, selling and walking away with options. Most of us won't, but today's guest sold his on his terms, hit Inc. 5000 on the way out, and is one of the few people I can actually ask the questions you'd ask if you were sitting in this chair. He's also been a recording artist, a performer, and a coach, more than 15 years in the game, served over 1,000 businesses, and shows up to every conversation that makes you want to grab a second beer. Matt Coffy is the founder of Profit Engines. We're going to get into the actual mechanics of selling an agency, the rockstar life, and the difference between being busy and having direction, and a hard rule that he lives by about who he lets on his boat. Matt, welcome to the show.
Greetings. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt, I had this intro here that I rock through and everything, but why don't you kind of give us like a 60-second high-level version of like who Matt is, what's Profit Engines, who do you serve, and what does your week actually look like here in 2026?
So, three questions. So, who am I?
Yeah.
Is the first one you asked. Okay.
Yep.
So, I think going back in time, being a corporate warrior back in the days of the 90s, I know that
Okay.
might be terrifying for some people to even hear that,
Yeah.
but we were fully fledged corporate warriors back there. Um, I kind of learned a lot about what it meant to be in highly performing engagements. And I had fairly large territories. I managed a $50 million territory for Sprint at
Okay.
one point during the early 2000s. And, it was okay, but I kind of, one day just pounded the table and said, I've had enough with this. And the entrepreneurial spirit, was sort of underlying all the things that I had done up to that point. And it finally released. And around 2010, I just started consulting. I didn't have any idea what I was going to do, but I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't going to stay in a corporate environment. So I did start doing some consulting because I knew a lot of businesses that might need someone who knows what I knew, which is a
Yeah.
lot of experience and so forth. So I built a website to show my consulting chops, and my consulting wasn't taking off, but people wanted a website like the one I built.
Okay.
So I started to do that. And so I started to now, whenever I went to anywhere near me, I was asking people, hey, do you need any work done for websites and logos? Because I tended to have a knack for it. And I sat down with my dentist around 2011. She's like, yeah, I really need a website and I need, I'm sitting in the chair getting my tooth filled. And she's just like, well, yeah, I do need help. And that was my first real client that became the first recurring client, and that grew from 2011 to 2013ish. when Chase Buckner called me up and said, I'd like to be part of your team because he saw me, I go far back enough that my first podcast was with Gary Vaynerchuk.
Okay.
So it's like, I'm sort of like in that realm of like dinosaur level
Yeah.
of this business where you could call up Gary and get an interview, or at least call his assistant and get an interview. Anyways, so other than that, it progressed. Chase and I went forward and built, a multi-million-dollar agency. And he then eventually went to GHL, and I eventually sold the business. But the entrepreneurial spirit, that's kind of what I am. I'm a very, um, I would say, I call it living louder. I really do make an attempt to have a louder life, an experience or experiential life. And that
Mm-hmm.
was sort of one of the things both Chase and I agreed. Is like, he wants to surf, I want to play band stuff, and away we go, right? And so I would say that's me in a nutshell, is sort of living louder, trying to become something exceptional in life, as opposed to sitting around and waiting for things to happen. Or again, it's not always about the money. To me, it's been about
Right.
the life experience. So
Okay.
I think that's kind of the best way I would put it if you want to know me. What
Yeah.
does my week look like?
Yeah.
Well, it's rather quiet. As I think one of the things I've learned about going through a whole cycle of selling an agency is, don't be that guy who has to be busy. Be that guy who takes care of himself. I call it like the better project. I'm always trying to get better,
Mm-hmm.
either physically, or talent wise, or production wise, or so I'm always trying to do better things. So I've thought, you know, to keep my calendar open to get those things done. So I kind of keep space in my calendar to do things. Of course, I'm just like anybody else. I've got to meet with my team, and I've got a handful of accounts that we've got now that I've built. Well, it's a $500,000 business at this point. It's a little bit more than a handful, but rebuilding an agency makes you kind of get into the mode where you have to do some sales, and we pick up an
Mm-hmm.
account per week, and we're slowly getting that back to where I want to be, which is back into another 7-figure business. But my calendar's pretty much empty. I mean, I try
Yeah.
and keep it empty. I try and only keep sales, a small 15-minute meeting with my team daily, just to keep up with everything. And then I'm sort of filling my calendar with what I want to do, as opposed to the
Mm-hmm.
calendar filling me up. So
Yeah.
I would say I'm pretty limited on like what I approach for like
Yeah.
keeping myself into these busy calendars. And I
Yeah.
don't remember, what was the third thing you asked? There was another third part to
The
that.
yeah the third aspect was like, what is Profit Engine, which is kind of
Oh,
your
Providence.
agency now that you
Sure.
have now that you have now.
Yeah. So what I did when I sold the last agency is, I took my business, uh, sort of, I cherry picked the people that I wanted to come with me
Mm-hmm.
on the next journey when I sold my business, where they kind of eventually osmosed back to me. Um, and we're basically doing all the same things with a little bit more pizzazz, with obviously all the stuff with AI. But it's customers come to us and just don't want to deal with it. And when I mean it's like whatever, like
Yeah.
marketing and emails and ads and content, and think for me. That's what they want. They want me
Mm-hmm.
to come up and say, "Hey, you do it. I know you know how to do it. So you just do what you guys need to do." And that's pretty much what we end up doing.
Yeah.
Clients are very surprised at the acumen I have when I speak with them, because I'm usually going into business and business operations and financial strategies, and they're just like, "Okay, whatever you said, just go do that." Right?
Right.
Because I'm an older person in this environment. They kind of look at me and they go, "Well, you got some rings on the tree, so we'll trust you." So we're just a full service agency with
Yeah.
a little bit more, which is we have a lot of AI stuff running in the background with our clients, and we also have a call center, so we're booking our clients' calls for them as well.
Okay. Now, looking back at my notes here, like you had Customer Bloom and you had Practice Bloom. So obviously, like Practice Bloom was, a very niche, like medical niche agency. Is Profit Engine, is that a niche agency, or are you kind of taking the approach of like, hey, with this agency, I'm not going to niche down?
Well, it's so funny because I'm repeating the same exact pattern I did to be successful before. Um, Customer Bloom was the original agency, which was a nicheless agency. We didn't really
Yeah.
have a niche, and nor did I really care. I just got clients and we booked. As I said, my
Mm-hmm.
claim to fame is I hired prisoners out of a prison facility for work release that they could make phone calls for me, and they called everybody in New Jersey and just basically shoved me into appointments. I don't even know what they were saying, but they got me into appointments.
Wow.
And yeah, and so I started my business by having some prisoner in Wisconsin calling in New Jersey saying, "Hey, this guy's going to come see you about marketing." And I don't know what they would say, but they said something to keep me in there.
Yeah.
And so I started just, and it didn't really matter. So we built basically the business from there. Around the time Chase joined my company, we started thinking like, hey, look, these medicals are really active. And we started actually in the spine and chiropractic and
Yeah.
physical therapy. Started doing a lot of that, like more, I would say, break fix medical. And then we migrated towards med spas and weight loss centers and so forth over time. And then that became pretty much wellness and stuff like that became the next version of the company, which is Practice
Yeah.
Blue. Now, and that went to seven figures. But anyways, now I started Profit Engines, same thing, multidimensional. We serve anybody. We're,
Mm-hmm.
at 500,000. And now we're starting Patient Engines, which is our next version, because I'm released now from my 2 years that I couldn't sell to medical when I had my
Yeah.
sale of my agency. And so literally like the clock started ticking a couple of weeks ago and we've already gotten a bunch of new medical accounts and we're just like flooring it right now. I just did
Yeah.
commercials for the medical side. It's going to blossom, or bloom again. But this time, instead of Practice Bloom, it's Patient Engines. And instead of Customer Bloom, it's Profit Engines. Different models, but same
Yeah.
exact people. So,
Yeah, absolutely. As you're kind of now migrating back into like this like niche of like the medical space and everything like that, like what got you even back with like Practice Bloom or even now going back into this niche? It's like, what was the moment that you realized that the medical play was the niche to go? Like that was different than your kind of generalist agency you had before.
sure. So I'll do the before and I'll do the after. I mean,
Yeah.
I have the luxury to do this, which most people don't.
Right.
So what we found, and this is important for your audience who's listening, high transaction value, high velocity, that is the key. So a lot of transactions with high revenue, right? So if you looked at the time of the kind of movement of us from spine to PT to chiro to
Mm-hmm.
med spas to weight loss centers, it went in that same exact order. We started with low velocity but high revenue, which
Mm-hmm.
was okay. It worked. But then we moved into sort of chiro, which was too low revenue, but really high velocity.
Right.
And then we went into PT and sort of like all that sort of world of trying to get something functionally built out of that. And inevitably, we started to stumble across higher value coming from medical, any of the aesthetics world or
Mm-hmm.
wellness centers, which had higher transaction values and higher velocity. And,
Yeah.
and that is the same thing that happened now forward to 2 years ago after I sold my agency. I had 2 years of just general working with regular, general customers.
Mm-hmm.
And then now that I'm released, we're doing the same thing. So I couldn't really sell to medical for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
So I didn't have a choice. But, you know, the process when I have the conversation is so elementary to me to have a
Mm-hmm.
conversation with a practice owner or a doctor. They kind of just want to listen because I've done this for so long. It's
Yeah.
almost embarrassing if they have like a question that is like so, like I would say, below my pay grade that I have to actually sort of bite my tongue and let them kind of get into their own way and then
Yeah.
explain how that's not going to work and then reverse engineer it. And I'll tell them because of X, Y, and Z. And I don't think, again, this is where the challenge of maybe some of your listeners come to.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't come with just like being able to spit it off of a chat GPT or Claude answer. It doesn't work like that. You've got to
Mm-hmm.
literally have that conversation with a practitioner or an owner or a doctor that they'll understand your values on how and why you want to do it. And I think there's the challenge that we're all running into now, which is like, the level of intelligence that's out there is so high, meaning that they could read, or the agencies can read, or they can imbibe this stuff. But is there a true understanding?
Right.
And that is a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's like you're like you could be on a sales call, not really know crap about the industry, and just be like prompting ChatGPT and say, "Hey, here's what I'm talking. Here's what does this term mean?" Right? And you can act like you even know what they're talking about, but eventually you're going to get to a point in those conversations where that person who owns that practice is going to realize like, hey, this guy doesn't really know what the hell they're talking about, versus in your case it sounds
Crap.
like
Yeah.
you know everything about it because you've been working with this industry for how long. So it's like these people could come onto these calls and talk with you, and it's like there's no question as to whether or not Matt knows like what
Well,
he's talking about or
I
not.
think one of the things that I'm doing right, and I think I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think
Yeah, you're
one of
good.
the things I'm trying to get to is I'm already foreshadowing what they're going to ask and what their questions are, and pre-establishing ground rules
Mm-hmm.
and conditions that they know need to be met. And whether that's through understanding the product details, um, in the case of GLP-1s, we sell tons of those products,
Yeah.
titration amounts, vendors that support the network of people that are in the space. There's so many things that you start to have a conversation. They're like, oh, 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 and we've even gotten to the point where we're connected to a lot of different vendors who help with supplying our uh, potential customers with things that they might need in order to make their practice better. And again, these are just stuff that
Yeah.
I've just done forever and ever and ever. And so there's usually a lot of unknowns when it comes to working with practices, but when you start to set up conditional arrangements with them in their head, where these are the
Mm-hmm.
things that they need to consider when they start working forward with you, it adds just a level of leverage to your conversation that they don't typically have.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of there's a lot of trepidation in the market. I know people who are listening to this understand this because they're in the trenches, and I'm still in the trenches. And I know
Mm-hmm.
what the trepidation is that everybody's been burned, or at least
Yep.
burned multiple times, right? And I think it's the level of not necessarily what I just said of like all the stuff and all the connections and all my preconditional stuff. It's not just that, but I think what it is, it's a level of um, business acumen that
Mm-hmm.
helps the client live the life that you can give them, and trying to explain to them, where are you going in your life? What are we trying
Yeah.
to do? And I have those discussions at a very deep level to say, what's the point? What are you trying to do? Like, where are we
Yeah.
going with this? So that it's not just about like all the esoteric stuff of like, hey, I can do this cost per lead and I can get you this many customers. Like,
Right.
it's actually being a partner in their life. And I've changed a lot of people, and people will say this to me. They're like,
Mm-hmm.
"You've really helped me like become a better business owner." And
Okay.
that's a whole nother discussion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of those things. Like oftentimes, it also sets you guys apart, right? Because everybody else comes in just talking about cost per click and all these different things, versus you're like, hey, yeah, we can talk about all that crap, but like let's talk about your goals and where we can get to. Because I imagine a lot of these practice owners, like they probably haven't had, depending on where they're at in business, some of them may have not had a day off in how long, or not been able to take a vacation without, having to worry about, are they going to make payroll costs or whatever it is. And you're like, hey, how can we get to that point where you could take 2 weeks away from your practice and the engine on the back end is still running and you don't have to worry about anything in terms of lead gen and marketing, everything like that as well.
You know what they also want? They don't want to work.
Yeah.
None of these guys want to work. Like, they want somewhere, somehow, to get out of this. And we've been helping them start coaching businesses and training
Mm-hmm.
systems to get additional revenue into their business. One of our clients, when I started with him, was at a negative $10,000 a month revenue. He was just he wanted coaching, he needed help, blah blah blah, and we took him for a big ride.
Yeah.
And now, yesterday, I spoke with him. He's doing $700,000 a month in recurring revenue. And he's actually been approached by Hollywood, by the D'Amelio sisters and their capital group, to put him into production. So, there's unbelievable stories because of the
Mm-hmm.
trajectory that I've been able to help people mentally with making better decisions and growing their mindset as well. And
Yeah.
that's why I think this comes down to those couple of things that most businesses need, which is they actually need a cheerleader,
Yeah.
and they need marketing help.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to take a quick little pivot. You mentioned like this client of yours, being approached to be by Hollywood and everything like that. But let's talk about you being on stage for a minute. Like, you've been a recording artist, performer, all of that. What did being on stage like teach you about running a business or growing your agency that like somebody who has like an MBA never could learn?
Well, I mean, thinking on your feet's the only thing you really have.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I think being terrified because you're in front of a lot of people and you have to perform. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's naked. You are on stage. There's a lot of faces looking at you.
Yeah.
Lights are on you. People are staring at you. And I've done this for a long time, so I'm over the sort of the butterfly stage or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get to certain levels, I can remember when we warmed up for George Thorogood, and the stage was like 10 feet off the ground. I looked up, it's 40 feet high. There's risers of lights everywhere. It's 40, huge stage. I'm like going, this is like really like size. If I fall off the stage, I'm going to kill myself. But what I'm trying to make a point is that um, I think the reality is that the rules of business are very much the same in the rules of running a band and being successful and performing and being around the right people and the coaches that I've worked on both sides. I have a coach on the music side. Scott Sherrard from Little Feat has been a producer for me, a mentor, and we're good friends, and we have, and he's been an amazing um, experience that I had. The same thing I had with James Schranko from Australia, who was amazing to help me when I was growing my business. I've had coaches that have been just fantastic people who can give. You don't have to like think for yourself. You should ask people, like get some
Mm-hmm.
help if you're trying to get to the next level. So certainly thinking on your feet and being able to perform and being able to know what you're supposed to do and being prepared at all times is sort of what I have to do, whether in
Yeah.
business or if I'm on stage.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
um, the reality is that I've done that by utilizing really good coaching and paying for it, right? Because it's not cheap. But
Mm-hmm.
also product wise and stuff that I have is I'm really trying to develop and produce things that are really effective. Whether I'm doing a music video or whether I'm doing a production for a customer, I really think that it's got to be a top notch, if not like if someone doesn't experience what I want them to experience, which is they
Mm-hmm.
should be wowed, whether
Right.
it's the business or it's the music. I'm not satisfied.
Yeah.
So I think there's some level of um, gradual experience that you have to go to get to these levels. But for me, it's been an unending sort of upward climb to be better. As I say, I call it Project Better, where I'm trying to get better at all the things that I do all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So let's now kind of pivot into like the acquisition of you selling Practice Bloom and Customer Bloom. Like, walk me through
Mhm.
how that conversation like even began. Was it like an inbound conversation? Was it, you were at the point where you're like, hey, I'm ready to sell and be done? Was it brokered? Like, how did all this begin?
Well, I'm sure everybody would love to know that I have some secret sauce or that I was able to do this without much, let's just say, drudgery. Um, I did the thing that would make sense for me, which I started to try and sell to business brokers, try and give them marketing advice.
Mm-hmm.
And I would call them up and say, hey, how about we trade? I'll give you marketing, you give me advice on selling a business. So this was probably around 21 or 22, just after COVID. And I started to say, well, if I'm going to try and plan an exit, I've got to start kind of 2 years in advance, right? Because
Yeah.
this is you just don't go sell a business. You
Right.
graduate to understanding how to sell a business, and then you get into selling the business, right?
Yeah.
So I spent time with a couple of different broker agencies working, trying to help them with their marketing. And that got me like inside all their content and I
Mm-hmm.
kind of got the inside view. And I'd worked with a couple of them. And so I kind of got what needed to be done, right? Books have to be straight, things have to be done
Mm-hmm.
correctly, and you've got to have operations and you have to be out of business, right? So, meaning that if you want to sell a business, ideally you should not be able to be part of the business. Meaning, if someone wants to buy your business, if you have to be part of the sale to make it happen, then it's really difficult, because that's what ends up being a challenge, because if you remove yourself from the business, is it going to explode? That's the big
Mm-hmm.
question mark, right? So I got to a certain point around the summer of 2023. We were very active, and my team was handling everything. I had about 30 people on my team, and I was basically kicked out of the company, meaning I kicked myself out,
Yeah.
because I didn't want to be in a position where I couldn't say that I actually could remove myself, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so day-to-day operations were being handled by my second in command, and she was just an absolute animal, horsepower, unbelievably, like one of those persons you get that just was the right fit for my background, and she was able to run the company without me, and the team was able to run. And so by 2023, I was starting to get bids, right? I was getting seven-figure bids, multiple seven-figure bids, because people really wanted to have this segmented medical business that I had created,
Mm-hmm.
and we were on all cylinders running hot. And it turned out, again, I've got several different agencies who wanted to just make me a part of their world, and there were good offers, but they were
Mm-hmm.
all kind of like third down, a third on this, and then a third over here. And that's sort of the traditional offer you're going to get, which is you're going to get 30% cash, then you're going to get 30% in some sort of financing, and then you get 30% bonus, and then there's a 10% override. There was no real good cash offers on the table. And what had happened was my second in command actually had a windfall. Her somehow, her situation with where she lived, the forest rangers burnt down a whole part of the town, and part of her house was burnt. And so anyway, she got a windfall from the government, and we started to negotiate a number for her to just take over. And it took,
Mm-hmm.
it was, and it's still difficult for me to even talk about this, because I think it's like it's like losing a child. Like I
Yeah.
lost my child, like I sold my child off. And so it was a good transaction. It was it's just like anything, transactions of this value. Everybody kind of doesn't feel good at the end, because it's sad. It's like, not only is it, we didn't get what we wanted, we departed, and we were good working partners together. And that was the thing that
Mm-hmm.
really was, as I said, she was an absolute animal on the ops side. I was an animal on the sales side. It was just going like crazy. But I knew I wanted to sell, because I wanted to move on. And again, not that there was anything wrong with the business. It was just time for me, because I had been doing it for quite a while. And I said, I need to sell this. And I also knew I could take advantage of, potentially taking that money, putting it into the market, and really
Yeah.
sort of like getting a better leverage from capital. And that's exactly what happened. So
Yeah.
we transacted somewhere around April of 2024. And part of the deal was that, I couldn't sell the medical and so forth and whatever. So I
Mm-hmm.
started to sell to all the, people around me here in New Jersey, and just pick up clients one by one. And we're already back to, half
Yeah.
million. So over the last 2 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's one of those things, like I had sold my book of business with my agency in September of last year, right? And so for me, it was far different, because much smaller, and to the point where, like, part of the conversations we're having is like, how involved is Brad in the business? How involved is Brad in the agency? And like, if this
Yep.
happens, like, who's going to churn, who's not going to churn, like all of those different things. So we were going through all of those different conversations, and like, I had a floor of like, this was the minimum that I was going to make. So if like everybody canceled, I was guaranteed something, right? But I had this max, right? And so I'm banking on that max, hoping the floor doesn't happen. And like, thankful by the grace of God, like, I think all but one like kept going, right? And then there was one that canceled right at the beginning. The rest have been with that agency since. And it was like, when that happened, I was in the early days of building Talent Fuse and everything, and thankfully, I had kind of from the beginning decided, like, hey, I'm not going to be client facing. So like, from the moment that somebody onboards with us, like, it's not Brad. Like, I do these sales calls right now, and then after that, it's not Brad. And I done it that way because of what I saw with my agency. It was like, okay, like, I cannot build this the same way, right? And you learn from past mistakes of like, what can I do differently this time? So I imagine right now with what you're building, you're like, hey, probably sooner than you did before, you're probably already trying to get out of like sales calls and sales conversations, account management,
Oh, yeah.
everything like that. Cause it's
Well,
like, hey,
I don't
I don't want to be
mind.
involved with that.
Yeah, again, I only have 6 people on my team right now. I
Yeah.
don't mind doing the sales because there's not that many. Like we're not running ads, we're not going crazy. We're just literally just sitting here and people are just showing up because we're doing so much damn content that
Uh
people
huh.
find us, right? So
Yep.
I mean that's sort of our product. We have this product called Content OS where we're doing 1,000 pieces of content a month, and people just show up. They're just like, I saw you do whatever, and I need some help, right? But
Mm-hmm.
I think you're right. So here's what I want to hang my hat on, which this is another lesson for your viewers. The good thing about building a massively big agency or multi-million-dollar agency, when you're pushing 200, 250,000 a month and it's just cranking and blah, 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 and you're bringing in clients left and right, it's really difficult to keep them. And that is a negative times 10 because it does things that you don't expect. Yes, you lose a customer or you lose the revenue, but you lose faith in the market. The market
Mm-hmm.
starts to not see you as the player. The reviews start to be, these guys suck because no one would call me back and blah blah blah. And then your team is like, what's wrong? Like why is this happening? Because look, we were bringing on like 30 plus accounts a month. It was absolutely bananas when we were in our heyday. Just we couldn't hire fast enough to even keep up with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I never want to have that happen again. And so our retention rate now is like 99.9%. Like no one leaves us because we take care of everybody.
Take
As I
care of
said, a
them.
project better. I'm like always trying to make things better. And I
Yeah.
don't think there was any rhyme or reason because I didn't know. I didn't know we couldn't handle bringing on 30 new clients a month. I'm like, come on, guys, let's
Yeah.
go. But I wasn't doing the management,
Yeah.
right? As you said, you're out of it. Like, and so
Mm-hmm.
yes, I was helping with ops, and we had people in ops that were probably the best selections for people who would be able to handle a lot of stress. And so I think what I've learned is to grow consistently, to grow at a pace where everybody gets a handhold, everybody feels like they're getting a good experience, even
Mm-hmm.
when we're not doing like, even if we have problems with it, like their ads suck or something happens, they come back to and say, "Look, I'm not mad at you guys. Let's just figure it out, right?"
Yeah.
And that's a much better conversation than you guys don't listen to me. No one's called me back. There's emails. I can't find anybody. You guys, I hate you, and slam the phone, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I never want to be in that conversation again. I mean, it's there's going to be randos that obviously something will happen, and that's not something. As I said, 99.9 to 0.01%. There's always that one guy
Yeah.
or gal. But other than that, I mean, keeping the ship steady. I mean, I look at my email in the morning. There's never anybody complaining. There's never like it's a rarity that I have a problem. Nothing's blowing
Mm-hmm.
up. There's like I used to be terrified to open my email in the morning back in 2023 because I knew we had so many customers with so many challenges, and then I would get mad at the staff, and then the staff would get mad at me because I would tell them, "Go get your work done." I mean, again, I think that's the lesson. I'd say think about churn as the most important thing. New business is good, but keeping business is more important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And so on that kind of same note, like if there's somebody who's listening, they're at that, I'm going to say like 50K, 60K monthly recurring revenue mark right now. And they're like, hey, I want to be able to sell this thing in like 3 years, 5 years, whatever it may be. What are like the three things that you think they should be doing, begin doing this quarter, so that way come, 3 to 5 years from now, they actually could sell?
It's a good question, and it's going to be a different answer for each person's
Yeah.
individual tastes. The market's kind of looking for players in specific genres, right? So a generalist agency isn't the best one. So, as I said, after you've sort of maybe gone through a year or two of figuring out what you like to do and who you might want to serve, start to single it down because if you do want to sell, you're probably better off selling as a specific vertical or something. Again, it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily need to be a niche specific. It could be a horizontal niche. You could be just the guy who does reviews or whatever. Like,
Right.
something, but it has to be like, so it's something that you could package up and say, this is this
Mm-hmm.
component you may be missing, Mr. Agency owner or business owner or whatever, something that you really want. The second thing is, as I mentioned before, if you're trying to do this, you've got to get someone behind you that's going to be second in command that can take over and run it for you. because the big thing that you're going to have to consider when you start to get into the sales process is, do you want to come along with the sale or do you not want to come along with the sale? I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to, right?
Right.
But you may, or the person listening to this may want to go along with the sale. So that might be a little bit more intrinsic to them to
Yeah.
maybe be part of the business. But those two things are good. Now, you want to talk about mechanics. I mean, obviously, you have to have all your books straightened out. You have to have all your contracts and all the things that, you've done.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I think what would really sell is the length of the customer that's been with you, because that's what always ends up being the determinator for the value of your business, which is what's going to stay and what's going to drop.
Right.
And right now, I've had customers that have been with me for a long time. Like,
Yeah.
they've been with me since the start, and they've come back to me, right? Even after I sold the business, they might have dropped off, but then they came back. But those are the things I would consider, like length of customer. Like, the longer the customer stays with you, the more valuable that is to another buyer. So
Mm-hmm.
having those long-term relationships, as I said, churn is it's the killer on all sides, and it also affects when you want to sell.
Yeah, absolutely. Last big question for you. On the guest form that you filled out for us before this, you said be careful about who goes on your boat. I'm taking that as a metaphor, as like the boat in business, like who you allow in your business to help you grow this machine, right? But like, what exactly is it you mean by that, and how can people protect themselves from who's on their boat?
Right. It's all sides, right? It's customers, it's employees, it's vendors, it's, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been screwed by vendors who just say they're going to deliver and then they don't even deliver. They make it worse, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've had people who have worked for me who have just blown apart, like literally, like exploded, like out of nowhere. They were like good one day and then they're gone the next, right? And then I've also had really bad customers who have
Yeah.
caused horrendous problems and created morale problems within, like giving people stress attacks. And obviously, you don't want that either. So
Mm-hmm.
it's on all sides. It's vendors, employees, and your customers. Everybody needs to be on the same plane. Like,
Yeah.
it's funny how when I speak to people, like, I kind of do a litmus test to see if they're actually worth dealing with. At this point, I don't give a shit. Like, I'm not going to like put people into my boat that are going to cause it to sway and rock
Mm-hmm.
it, because
Yeah.
I don't have the need to do it. Like, it's not like I have to tomorrow, feed my family, or something like that.
Right.
It's more like I want to build a ship now going forward that's worthy of bringing people on board. It's like I have a little bit more, um, I guess, exception to the rule is a lot less now.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think when you build a business, you'll take anybody who can fog a mirror because you're just trying to build revenue. And
Right.
and sure, that works because you need it. But after a while, you start to go, okay, maybe it's not the best idea to bring, the guy who's throwing rocks as
Yeah.
opposed to the client who's asking you for help.
Yeah,
Anyway,
absolutely.
get the concept.
Well, Matt, thanks again for hopping on today. If those who are listening, if you want to learn more about what Matt's doing, you can find him at profitengines.com. Again, I'm Brad, and this is the Unfucked Agency.